This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
The term fake news goes back to 2018, though the concept, of course, has a longer history. In March of 2020, just when I was ready to air an Inside Out feature story on fake news, something I'm sure you remember happened that prevented me from coming to the office for weeks and weeks, and probably prevented you from going anywhere too. Well, this story never ended up airing. So now, in 2025, with legacy news agencies losing access to the presidential administration and articles crafted by artificial intelligence making it harder to tell the true from the false, Inside Out is revisiting my 2020 conversation with award-winning news reporter Bob Smietana, national reporter for Religion News Service. He's a former editor and a longtime correspondent for RNS, and his writing has appeared in USA Today, The Tennessean, The Washington Post, and other outlets. Keep in mind that back in 2020, Twitter was Twitter, not X, and artificial intelligence wasn't impersonating people that I know of. But in every other way, what Bob talks about here is as pertinent today as it was then. So why not sit back now and listen to Family Life's Inside Out on the topic of fake news. Not everything we read is true. Our mothers probably taught us that. And most of us, as a result, have learned not to respond to emails from generous Nigerian princes, for instance. But as the number of ways we receive information multiplies, it's gotten harder to tease the true from the false. Today on the Family Life Inside Out interview podcast, we're talking about ways to test the information that comes our way. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest is award-winning reporter for the Religion News Service, Bob Smietana. Welcome to Inside Out, Bob.
Glad to be here.
Bob, there seem to be as many ways to come up against false information as there are ways that we communicate. And I think sometimes what we read isn't intended to be false, but it just isn't written well or it's not fact-checked. But I'm sure some of the falsehoods are intentional, targeted manipulation. So let's begin with this. How do you define fake news? And can you give us a general idea of where it comes from?
Sure. So there's a couple kinds of what we could call fake news. There's just satire, which is, meant to kind of be humorous or poke fun at something, which, I often get, someone sending me a news story and then I look and see it's from the Babylon Bee.
Right.
The Onion or something. So there's that satire. There's what I would call activist news, which is news with a certain point of view that tends to only give you the facts that that support that point of view. So we see lots of that. We see a lot of magazines where they have a certain point of view, and they'll tell you what that is, whether it's conservative or liberal. And then there's sort of fake or intentionally misleading news, where either things are made up or overemphasized or just misreported intentionally to mislead you, to make someone else look bad. When I tell people, if you look at a piece of news that makes the people you hate look terrible, then you should probably be a little bit suspicious because, people are people. They're not all terrible. And if everything in the story is terrible and it's intentionally made you to react and to confirm your worst suspicions about people, then it's worth checking it out.
It's pitched to you for that reaction, you're saying?
Yeah, it's what they call integrative propaganda. It's writing or a story that makes you think that the way you see the world is exactly right. So the people you hate are evil and people you support are great.
It confirms your own biases that are already established.
Your own biases. So it's pitched really well to do that and to promote outrage.
Let me reintroduce you, Bob, if you're just joining us. This is the Family Life Inside Out interview podcast, and my guest is journalist Bob Smietana. Bob, way back in the dark ages when there were 3 television networks, we kind of trusted Walter Cronkite to announce the impartial recitation of world events. Were we right to do that? Does having more voices in the ether make it better for getting to truth, or has it made it harder?
It depends. So having one voice can be good because you've got some trusted voices, and so this is where to go to. On the other hand, those folks are telling you a certain view of the news, and so you only get a certain slice. So I like having lots of news sources. What I don't like is the speed it comes at sometimes, that people don't take a look and say, oh, is this vetted? Is this trustworthy? We've had this tremendous loss of professional journalists because of changes in the industry. And there's a reason it's a profession, because it takes time to verify facts and try to be impartial and to make sure you check the story out, where Twitter is easier. So I always tell folks that what happens on Twitter isn't the real world, but it's very simple. I see something, I can tweet it. The one thing having many different sources has done is it gives us lots of different voices and different points of view, and sometimes points of view that you haven't heard before. Mm-hmm. So that's good. It just means it's a lot more work for all of us.
So in other words, in theory, if we could expose ourselves to a whole bunch of those perspectives, we could come together with an integrated view, like a more holistic view of what's going on?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good. Sometimes, the voices of other folks aren't heard, or different perspectives. And there's so much going on in the world right now. It's great to have access to lots of information. It just means that you sort of have to sift it. So the historian Studs Terkel, who's very well known, Studs used to talk about like mining for gold. When they mine for gold, sometimes they'll have a great big input. You throw lots of stuff in there and you sift it to find the truth. Right. So we have to do a lot more of that now. The sifting has shifted to our side rather than someone doing it ahead of time.
Right. Yeah. So if we're going to sift, and I think you and I would agree that we need to do that, what are some concrete ways we can do that? What are ways we can test what we're reading and what we're hearing?
Good. So a couple of things. I think the first thing you can do is read the whole story or watch the whole video. Don't just rely on the headline or a tweet about it. Read the whole thing. And then I think you should ask, how do they know that? So if someone gives a statistic, someone tells a story, ask how they know it. Ask what their source material for that is. I actually would do this in church during the sermon sometimes, because sometimes pastors use fake anecdotes or bad statistics. My daughter actually made me stop. But, I think, is that story really true? Because you get these anecdotes, you're like, that does not sound true.
Right.
Well, that data. So you ask, how do you know this? Where does this information come from? I think you should also look and make sure there are multiple sources in the story. So it's not just from one person. And if its story is about someone else, did they talk to that person? Does the other person have a chance to tell their side? One thing you can do, too, if you're on the internet, is look at the URL of the story to make sure. This is a little bit less common now, but for a long time, there were fake sites that were supposed to look like, say, ABC News or NBC News.
Right.
That's died down a bit. Check the URL, make sure it's not from the Babylon Bee or some other satire site, and then make sure you read the About Us.
Right, where they come from, what their point of view is. Yeah.
A lot of times, if it's an activist site, you can tell what their point of view is and who they think is right and who they think is wrong. And so have that in mind, that the person telling you this news may only be telling you the things they want you to hear.
Is there something about people maybe watching regularly some program or be going to some site and they know that it has a point of view or that it's commentary, right? Like an essayist in a sense. But is there something in us that wants to draw the fact from that or say this is true, even though we are aware anyway, at least intellectually aware that it has opinion woven through it?
Confirmation bias is a huge problem. We want to believe that the people we don't like are bad, or that our point of view of how things should work is right. So if we have a policy we like or a political party, sometimes we treat the news like cheering for a sports team. We want our team to win. And so I don't blame the newscaster if my team loses, but I want them to love my team and think everything is great with my team, and I don't want to hear bad news. But we all know in our experience that the world is more complicated, that people are more complicated, that not everyone is 100% good or 100% bad. And sometimes the policies that we like don't get the results we want. We don't get mad at the weatherman, for example, when they say it's going to be snow. We were glad they said that because it's helpful information. They don't particularly look for bad weather. They just tell us about it.
Right.
So I think the best news can do that, can give you the information, and then you can decide on how to act. But sometimes I think we only want the news that makes our side look good. And folks now, because they have access to news channels of communications, you can tell a story that isn't 100% true and it sounds really compelling, but you can only tell the facts that you would like people to hear.
Yeah, and then there's some sort of cycle there, right? Because we've become a more divided country, so we want our team to win. But then the more we listen to only certain sources that only have one side, we become even more divided. It seems it's just such a cycle. It's such a cycle.
Yeah, it is. the nice part about being a reporter, so I cover religion,
right,
is you can't know everything. So you're always learning something new. So, and because we cover it in a non-sectarian way, we're not taking sides. We don't have a point of view we're trying to advance. It's actually very freeing because I can say, oh, here's what happened. I can talk to all these different folks. It's a really helpful thing. I wish more people would feel like they don't have to win. When you think you have to win, you don't listen. So when I listen and only listen so that I can rebut what you're saying, I'm not understanding instead of trying to listen to understanding. And if you've ever had an argument with a friend or a spouse, you know what this is like.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not very helpful. No. Well, the same thing is news, right? It's not very helpful when someone's trying to tell you something that's important and you just don't want to hear it.
Right. Right. So part of our division is the input that we choose, and oftentimes it's input without nuance, but also it's our lack of attention to listening. Yeah. So what does the fact that people who are Christ followers want everything in life to be sifted through and tested through our belief in Christ, how does that meet this conversation?
Well, I think there's two things. One, we have this commandment about not bearing false witness. So, so sharing news that's not true would violate that commandment. I was recently speaking to a bunch of Baptist news editors for Baptist publications. And one point I try to make in a setting like that is that if you read the Bible, it's pretty straightforward. Here's things that went well. Here's things that didn't go so well. There is no attempt to protect God's reputation, to make God's followers look good, even if they're well known. There's a lot of straightforward reporting on this happened and this didn't go so well.
Right.
So I think there's no conflict between truth and faith. There shouldn't be. Some things are disappointing. It's disappointing, but the Bible is pretty clear about human failings. So when we see a human person fail, we shouldn't be surprised. Right. So I don't think there's a conflict there. And I don't think that, reporting news only that makes people of your faith look good, there's no conflict between the faith and the truth. And then the second one would be that we have a commandment that sharing fake news is bad.
Oh,
yeah. We have a commandment. Don't bear false witness. Yeah. So if I am,
I was being literal. I'm thinking, whoa, I don't remember that one.
But false witness is fake news. But if I bear false witness and say this person is terrible because I don't like them and I don't report the actual facts about them, then you could argue that you're bearing false witness. That is one of the top 10 commandments. Yeah,
you're right. Boy, I missed that one. So how would you encourage people listening who, let's say, I don't think I'm listening to only one side, or I think I'm pretty nuanced. How would you encourage me to kind of test that water or perhaps expand? How might I expand to make sure that I'm not fooling myself?
I would look for folks that you disagree with and read what they write about. And then also look, when you get into the material, look at source material. If they're linking to folks and they link to a source report, you can read a news story from two different sites or two different outlets on the same report and it'll have different conclusions. Yes. So go back to the source material. You can read people or listen to people you disagree with and understand what they have to say and then check out what they have to say. Because sometimes the folks you disagree with are right or they have a point of view. I think getting away from the fact that you have to win and you can only listen to folks who promote your side will be extremely helpful. It's freeing too, because when you ask people to explain what they mean, then you get to learn something and you free them up to not feel like they have to be angry at you and convince you. You can just listen to them.
It humanizes it. Yeah.
It humanizes it. Yeah. And if the news is making you feel angry or hateful to other folks, then I would start to say, one, is this true? And two, is this helpful to me? Is it helpful to me to be at a site that always says these folks are evil and we should, oust them because they're terrible?
Yeah.
I don't think that's very helpful.
Well, it's not uplifting for certain. I don't think anybody wants to be a Pollyanna. I think that we want to feel like we're measured and that we are actually seeking truth. But I know that it's a challenge to make sure that I'm getting input from all sides. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Bob, for joining me here on Inside Out and talking about this.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much for asking me.
My guest has been award-winning journalist Bob Smietana. I'm Martha Manikas Foster with Inside Out on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.